Welcome to Merkaba Chakras, where we talk Buddhism in the fifth dimension.
Welcome to another podcast episode of Merkaba Chakras. I'm your host, Vaughn Galt, and today we talk about Hebrew energy healing and the living letters using the resonance in music with author and professor Del Hungerford. So with that, Del, welcome to Merkaba Chakras.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a good time.
Yes, I love this concept. And not necessarily a concept, it's a practical application in a lot of traditions, and we're going to get into that, of resonance and tuning and music and frequencies and how it affects our physical bodies and our energy fields. So before we dig into your work, can you tell us how you even got into Hebrew energy healing through music?
Well, I'm a musician and I was with the group and they're like, you know what? If they say that the Hebrew letters are living letters, so if they're living letters, that means they have a frequency, which means they have a musical pitch. And so I went down that rabbit trail and it took me about 8 years to figure out what they were. Because, everything is based on patterns and you start looking for the patterns. And I basically knew nothing about it. So when I began the journey, I had to learn a lot about the Hebrew culture, the Hebrew language itself, and then start looking for the patterns. And I think I figured it out. 2018 is when I finally figured out what the musical frequencies of the Hebrew letters were. Then another two friends of mine, Alice Briggs, no, it was Leah, because Alice was part of another book, Leah Lesesna and Seneca Sherburn. And the three of us together decided to put together this book, Healing in the Hebrew Months. And before I did that, I started doing a song of the month based on the particular Hebrew letter for that month and the musical frequency for that month. And that's where the book Healing in the Hebrew Months came out of, because I know that question's coming later, but it ties in to how I figured this out.
Okay, so the figuring out aspect of understanding the Hebrew living letters and the effects on the human body, they don't already have that in other publications, or is it taught in Hebrew study or anything at all? Is it just kind of like a secret school, a secret discipline that only maybe certain people are privy to in monastic studies? I mean, why is it not available? Why did you have to do so much digging?
Those are good questions. Well, number one, you have to understand a lot about music theory in order to figure it out. And people have used the cantillations, which is, if you ever watched a rabbi or someone who's going through their bar or bar mitzvah, and they take a pointer and they read the Torah, and they will read it in a sing-song fashion, and they call that cantillation, and they have certain ups and downs for certain phrases. And a lot of people were basing it on that, but there didn't seem to be a pattern. See, one of the things I'm discovering is there's always going to be a pattern to something. So I had to find what is the pattern. And I knew that the first 9 letters of the Hebrew alphabet fit with the musical harmonic series early on. Mm-hmm. But the remainder of them didn't seem like they did. But I also had an expectation that each Hebrew letter was going to have a specific frequency, that it's only going to have one frequency. And see, when you have an expectation that it's going to look like something, then you don't see anything outside that box. And even I had it literally sitting in front of me for 2 years before I figured it out. Once I stepped out of the expectation of what I thought it was supposed to look like, all of a sudden there it was. So I think that's why a lot of people never really figured it out, because we've only been able to figure out specific musical frequencies since the Industrial Revolution, which was in the mid 1800s. So the Hebrew people might have sung it, not even realizing they'd done it. just like the ancients would do the ohms and all these other things.
Right.
They would do it based on cymatics because they could see a certain shape, and they know that when they would get a specific shape that they'd hit the pitch. So that was their way of doing it. But for us, now we can measure things in hertz,
Mm-hmm.
and that helps us determine. But if you don't understand music theory, then it's going to be difficult to figure it out.
Right. Can you explain in layman's terms, a short understanding of music theory in relation to understanding the resonance in music in literature? Because I study and read Latin, for example. Not like I ever had any use for it, but
then you can read my master's diploma for me.
I probably can. I probably can. Yeah. And I can probably kind of underline the vowels. But anyways, in Latin, in short, in Latin, the Iliad, for example, the book, the Iliad, if you read it in Latin, you can basically highlight where all of the vowels are, and that's where the music hits. And so when they read the Iliad in Latin, it hits at certain points and it goes up and down, whatever. And it basically, like, you don't have to understand Latin, but there is a song and a pattern to the story of the Iliad. And it's slow, and then it climaxes and it goes down, and it kind of follows the storyline of what's going on in the story. So it's beautiful in that the music and the symphony of the book, the Iliad, matches the storyline of what's going on in the book, the Iliad. But it only happens in Latin. You can't transcribe that into other languages. It's only in Latin. And so I wonder if there's a parallel between the frequencies and phonetics of the Latin language as you see also in the Hebrew living letters. I mean, is there like some kind of correlation? Or is there like a similar philosophy that is being transcribed between linguistics?
Well, I think that's part of the cantillation process of they sing song when they read the Torah. But I realized that didn't really have a whole lot to do with the actual musical frequencies of each letter. But what I found out is that each letter is really based on a key. So when you're looking at music theory, it's understanding the key of C, the key of F, the key of G. How do you build the C major chord? How do you build the C minor chord? How, this is how you read music. These are the lines and the spaces on the staff. Here is a chord progression. Your standard chord progression is based on this. So it's understanding the nitty-gritty pieces of music so that when you're reading sheet music, you understand what you're reading. You're taking the little black dots and interpreting those. Now, there's a lot of musicians who play music, but they don't read music. And so that's all through intuition. And when you're reading music, it's actually the only thing that you do in life where your brain is firing, the left and right brain are firing simultaneously while you're playing, if you're reading sheet music and playing a musical instrument, because you've got the creative side working and you've got the intellectual side working simultaneously, which is why they say that people who participate in music in school tend to do better in most subjects because they learn how to make both sides of their brain work together. So when I'm talking about music theory, it's understanding the inner workings of how music itself works, including musical frequencies, the harmonic series. Harmonic series is part of nature. Your voice sounds different than my voice because the harmonics in your voice, like the octaves and the thirds and the seconds and the fifths that are all above the fundamental or the bass note, are going to resonate differently for your voice than they are for mine, which is why you can go into some buildings and they'll have a voice activation system that will let you in, because there's really no two voices that have the same sound in them. And that's because the harmonics are different. That's how you can tell the difference between a piano and a clarinet, which clarinet is my instrument, by the way. And you can tell the sound of everything is because all of the different notes that are in the one note we call it a voice print. Yeah, everyone has their individual voice print.
Right. I love this subject. It's in my my Buddhism books in terms of uh everyone having a unique mandala that is imprinted in their voice. And the only difference between one person or another's person's mandala um is the frequency in which radiates from within their voice or from within their consciousness. Now, this gets into something a little bit metaphysical in concept because I like to relate a little bit of Buddhism because it's a Buddhism podcast. But in Buddhism and also in Hinduism, ancient Hinduism, there is the concept of frequencies as a as like a voice activator into different portal points, different gateways, different temples. And we have temples, especially in India, ancient temples that no one can get into, that the only way, according to folklore, to get into it is to have a certain resonance in your voice. And no one has been able to have that resonance to open that doorway. But it opens supposedly under a certain frequency that certain people's voices will have. So does that have to do with the frequency of the consciousness level of the person, or what does it have to do you have any kind of insight into that?
Well, I mean, you're going to find that concept in every religion because it's in
Mhm.
Christianity as well, but it's what I call the mystical part of Christianity. And and what the Bible says, whether it's the Jewish version, Hebrew version, or the Christian version, because they're both based on the same thing. Um, in that one, you are pairing your consciousness with the consciousness of a higher power, which
Mhm.
we call creator. And so you've got your consciousness with his consciousness, and that's quantum entangled. So when you got that quantum entanglement, that what did Einstein call it? Spooky action at a distance, where this one starts and all of a sudden this one far away resonates and they entrain, which they come
Mhm.
into agreement with. So that's what that is.
Mm.
So when you begin resonating with that higher power thing, that's when I think that those portals open. And
Mm.
I've seen that in my own life, so that's the only way I can say that. But I do see it in several. So what you're talking about, I'm not familiar with Hinduism or Buddhism, but it seems very similar because I say this: who knows where Jesus went when he was on Earth? He just
So
poof disappeared, and you never knew where he went. And
so
they have a different name. Who knows?
so let me ask you this. With so you say you've had your own experience with that, with voice activating different experiences or different. I mean, what was your experience?
Uh, we'd be here for about a week if I started going
Can you
through
give me
all
the
of
short? Can
those.
you give me the short? Can you give me the short? Because people learn a lot from the different teachers on the show.
Well, I have some of them in the book Kingdom Shift because you did mention that. And so for example, that came from an experience
Mm.
where I was taken into a library in heaven and all this paperwork was sitting on the desk in front of me. And I saw all these words across the top. And I'm like, huh? and I'm sitting at the table with creator. I mean, that's the name I'll use because I think most everybody can resonate with that. And was getting downloads of stuff to go look up. And sure enough, I go look it up. And it was like a month-long conversation. I'd go to school, do my work during the day, and then I'd come home at night and I'd immediately go back to that place. But it doesn't mean I wasn't thinking about it when I was at school. And I put that book together in a month. Just
Yeah.
bam, bam, bam. And so to me, though, that's the kind of experience where you were in that place where you were resonating with that creative consciousness where you're getting downloads of stuff that open up to things that we can participate in and understand how creation itself works. And I believe that we have left the age of Pisces and have now entered the age of Aquarius. That song from the 60s, The
Yeah.
Dawning of the Age of Aquarius. I
Yeah.
didn't understand what that meant until maybe a couple of years ago.
Okay. We're gonna get more into that, and just to kind of close off this concept of music notes.
Mhm.
Have you ever tried semantics? Because music notes have been shown to have an image, its own unique mandala in semantics and harmonics research. So like the website Sound Made Visible, which everybody can go to, soundmadevisible.com, and they can send a copy of their voice, and it will show what their mandala looks like. It's just a 2D version of a 3D bubble, which is what we are, our energy field. But music notes have their own mandalas as well, their own,
Have you seen this?
Yes, yes, yes. So
Okay.
do they have the Hebrew living letters in that?
Well, if you look at it, if you know what the musical frequencies are of the Hebrew letters, which I have, you can get that in the book, Healing in the Hebrew Months. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Now I can see it. Yeah.
I have the chart in there, but at the same point, so for example, I'm going to play a note on here. Hopefully you can see this.
Mhm.
Just because let me just pick a note. Can you see that?
Mhm.
That's cymatics. It's the bubble you're talking about.
Yep.
But see, before we had this technology, they would use what was called a Chladni plate. And they would put sand on this plate, and they'd rub a violin bow on it, would create shapes. And that's how they used to tune gongs way back, 3,000 years ago. What they would do is to figure out whether they had the right resonance, they would put sand on the gong and excite it. And when it made the right shape, using the sand that they put on it, they knew the gong was done. And so cymatics has been around forever. And as I said earlier, I believe that that's how they did the ohms, and they knew they hit the right pitch because they could put a piece of sand, stretch out a membrane over something and then put sand on it. And then they would sing the note until the shape got correct.
Exactly.
So I think that's how they did it.
You're correct. You're correct. That's exactly how it is. And Mr. Reed, who owns the Simoscope and created the Simoscope, he worked off the same concepts to make it visible for everybody else. So now we can all see what we look like. Okay, so my next question for you is, many of my audience have read my book, Buddhist Mandalas, which are one of my many Buddhism books, which explain that people are energy, and it is the consciousness level of their aura field that radiates at different frequencies. Now, it is the frequencies that determine our matching reality and the overall health of the avatars, which our souls engage with physically or with physicality through. So in Buddhism, the use of music, chants, and resonance to tune our Merkabas into healthy states is very common, but this truth is also in Judaism and many others. But explain to people, in short, what is the Hebrew energy healing? Like, because it's easy to get lost in all these different areas of the concept, but in short, what is it for people?
Well, I think that everything with the Hebrew tradition is based on starting with self first. So if you are, I look at it, we have thoughts. So you have these little, you have a thought river that goes across, and you can pick and choose which thoughts you're going to pull out of the river. And then once you you pick those thoughts out, you entertain the thoughts. As you entertain them, you form an intent, and that intent then makes an action. So those are the three ingredients that I call that really determine how we work things out. So you've been around people, you walk up and you're like, dude, there's something I'm gonna stay as far away from that person as possibly can. There's all kinds of yuckiness on them. That's because what's within them is based on their negative thoughts, intents, and their actions. But the Hebrew perception is it starts from the heart first. So when we change our heart, when we change from negativity to positivity, when we change from anger to love and hate to also love, or whatever the negative stuff that's in us, if we override that with a stronger frequency, then that becomes what's in our heart. So it radiates from your heart first. Then it starts going into your soul, because our soul tends to do goofy things. Then as we fill up our energy field within us, then we can spread that into our aura beyond us. So, that seems to be the tradition of the Hebrew culture, is everything starts within yourself first. So a lot of people will say, okay, I want to step into love or whatever it is, they focus on something, and that might be for that time. But if it doesn't become a part of you 24/7, it's not really doing what it should. I want this to become a part of me 24/7. I mean, and I know it works because in 2000, for 19 years, I had something that was very similar to chronic fatigue. And that was as a result of having lived in an abusive marriage, left the marriage, and then I just had all this negative emotional stuff. And I do believe that many sicknesses and things that we carry have emotional roots. So that when you start dealing with those negative emotional roots, overriding them with the opposite thing, then you get that into your heart, not just a 5-minute thing here, a 10-minute thing there, half-hour thing. When it becomes a part of you, then that is what the energy that is supposed to work through the living letters, because the living letters are living all of the time, not 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. They have to become a part of us. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So the Hebrew energy healing, via the living letters is basically a way of life.
Yes.
Okay. And it's a heart-centered life.
Yes.
Okay.
And I relate it to music. I'm a classical musician by trade. I have a doctoral degree in music and I teach. I'm a college professor. So I joke with my students that I have spent more years in a practice room than they have been alive. And of course, they usually laugh at me when I say that. But how often do I sit there and play the same stupid scale over and over and over and over, to the point where it just becomes such a second nature to me that I look at a piece of sheet music and I'm like, oh, that's just an F sharp major scale. I'm done. I don't have to look at every note because it's a part of me. So when you learn to engage the Hebrew living letters, you are really learning to make them part of your life so that you are living what is in them 24/7.
Right. And is each Hebrew living letter, I know you say they have their own musical note, but do they have their own philosophy as well, or their own energy? Like this one is about, I don't know, forgiveness, and this one is about acceptance, and on and on and on. Is it like that?
Well, they more tell the story of the gospel, just kind of like the original Mazzaroth did, what we have called the zodiac signs, but we didn't have that version of it until the 1950s. Before that, they represented the story of creation. And that's how the Hebrew culture looks at it, as the 12 constellations are telling the story of creation. And we're part of that creative process, and we are co-creators. So each Hebrew letter has what I call a fundamental frequency, which is kind of like a drone. And then there's all of these other notes that you can sing or play. It's just like, if I'm going to go up to the piano and I'm going to play in the key of C, yes, I'm in the key of C, but I have all these other notes available to me. But C is my rock position. It's my fundamental note. It's my home note. So I think that each Hebrew letter has a home note, but there's all these other notes that go in with it, but then you get back to the home note.
Okay. And so in terms of a couple quick techniques that people can learn from the book Healing in the Hebrew Months, like if they were, let's put it into a case of an application. Let's say they were having issues with, I don't know, fatigue, okay, in their life. And they wanted to find, since the living letters are a way of life, they wanted to find a new way of life to address the constant fatigue. Which letter typically would call out to address that specific issue? Or is it a set of letters, or?
Okay, my question is why are you dealing with the fatigue? So you're not see what that is that's looking at the symptom. What is the cause of that fatigue? Which is, like I said, I had chronic fatigue. I don't know if that's what it was, but because me and doctors, we don't tend to agree on things. Because every time I go, they say something stupid and I turn around and walk out the door. I'm like, I spent $200 on them telling me nothing. That was a
Well, that's
waste of
why I get a second and third opinion.
yeah. Too bad. Never mind. I'll keep my mouth shut. I was gonna say
Anyways,
something
my
about that.
insurance covers it all, so I get second, third. It's no different. They cover it all.
So for me, was it last year? This is the year 5782 in the Hebrew year, 5781. I did a whole year of going through the Hebrew alphabet where we start with leaving our personal Egypt. You know, so you know how the Hebrews, they walked out of Egypt, they had to leave everything behind that didn't make sense to them. So you're going to go through each month and you're going to be dealing with issues in your life that have been caused by various traumas. So if you're dealing with fatigue, my first question is, what's the trauma behind the fatigue? So it might, and you might have and then that's where I'd say, okay, which letter would be most helpful for me? And it might be different for you than it is for me, because I think we want a specific answer on how to do it. You're different than me. You have different issues than I do. So for you, it might be the letter Vav. Someone else, it might be the letter Nun. It all depends on your individual situation. And the thing I, did in the book is I've got several exercises. And so whatever it is that resonates with you at that moment, that's what you do. But any symptom that you've got in your body, find out what the root is.
Right. And oftentimes the root cause, this is sounding a lot like Buddhism, to be honest, because
they're all related.
Because it's all based off of your consciousness, and your consciousness is working with different things. So like, for example, a lot of people, when they start getting into advanced Buddhism and they start to try to understand that it is their consciousness that has different frequencies, and it's their consciousness that changes physical reality and what it is that they experience next. Then they start going, "What? This just feels like psychology." And that's who do you think is creating the universe in which you're existing in? Because you are an aspect. You are an aspect of God having a direct experience from within one of its own creations. So you have the ability to create, but the ability to create is reflective on what the user wants to create, and that's reflective on your perceptions, your intentions, your actions, everything that you were talking about. But there's so many different ways in which we continue to talk about the same thing, but for some people they can connect with the Buddhism. Some people, they can connect it with the Vedic Hinduism. Some people, like my best friend, she's Jewish, so she connects with that as her tradition, and it works with her. But some people, they were born into the Hebrew traditions, they don't connect with it, but they move on to something else. It doesn't really matter. It's all the same thing for the most part. We get to the same place, and we get to understanding that it is our understanding of reality and ourselves that create the greater outer world. So let me ask you this question: what if somebody is deaf? Okay, so if they're deaf, so if they can't hear the music, they can't hear the tones, do certain Hebrew living letters call out to them for whatever it is that they're trying to address to raise their frequency?
I'm not sure I have the answer to that question, but people who are deaf can feel the music. And are you familiar with a percussionist named Evelyn Glennie? She's from England, and she's a completely deaf percussionist. And when she performs barefooted. And she knows what the musical pitch is based on where in her body it resonates. And she does she did a TED Talk where she went into that. And when I was doing all my research about musical frequencies and the notes and everything like that, I've known who she is for a long time, because I'm a classical musician and so is she. And so even if someone is deaf, they're just going to hear music differently. They're going to hear it in their body, which you and I do too. But our ears work better than our outside ears work better than our inside ears. And she just says that she uses her inside ears to feel music. I mean, if you've ever watched her play, she's one of the most musical percussionists I have ever seen. And she knows exactly what's going on in the orchestra. She can hear every instrument in the orchestra, but she hears it through her body. not her ears. So it's just a matter of learning to hear it differently than you and I hear it.
Yeah. There's this exercise where you blindfold yourself and you stand on stage, and then you play the music, whatever music that you're listening to, and you can feel the emotion of each song just by tuning into the, I don't know, the energy or the frequency that your body feels. And each song has its own resonance as well. So that's like the same thing as how she does it?
It is, but she actually can feel the specific musical frequencies in her body. So she knows what the pitches are based on where it starts, wiggling, resonating in her body. Now she can also feel the rhythm because you can feel those pulses. And because she reads music really well, she can, put that, what she's seeing on the little black dots with what she's feeling from the orchestra. So every time that you're listening to music, you are going to feel it in your body as well as your ears. But here's the thing I have to say. You can listen to the same song done exactly the same way with 5 different artists. Some you're going to like and some you're not. And I think the reason is the intent behind the performer while they are performing the song. We forget the intent of the musician is just as important as the actual notes and the things that are coming out. Which is why what I do is I pair the musical frequency with the intent to create the energy that's needed to do what we are desiring or what needs to be done.
Okay, so let me ask you about the definition of intent, okay? Because they have this exercise in art whereby you can have 5, like you say, 5 different artists paint the same picture, and then you can look at 5 different versions of the same picture, but you can tell the energy. This one's a little bit more dark and dreary. This one's really, really light. This one's really, really happy. This one's, whatever. You can tell that each drawing of the same image has a different energy, and it's based off the energy of the artist and whatever they're emitting out into the canvas. So it's like the concept of the energy of the artist gets imprinted onto whatever it is that they create, and what they create has a similar resonance that carries forward. And that's why some people connect with certain artists work versus others that they don't really connect with as much. Is it the same thing in music as well as it is in art?
Exactly. Because remember how I was talking earlier, what's in your heart is going to come out in your energy field, and that's going to go into whatever you create. So that your intent is what's coming out of your heart. So if you're always angry at somebody, that intent is going to go into those feelings, which are basically embodied in intent, are going to come out. I mean, you can feel that on people. That's what, like I said, when you walk up to somebody and you feel, I want to stay away from that person.
Yeah.
And it is interesting because, I teach private lessons, and every half hour, a different student comes into my office. You can tell before they even walk in the door what's going on with them that day. Now, what I will do is if I can tell that they're in kind of not a great mood, I will just sit there and I'm like, I just resonate pure love. And I'll say, I even send a love bomb over to them. Let's send a hope bomb. Now let's send a peace bomb. So basically what I'm doing is I'm expanding my energy field over that student to help calm whatever that frustration might be for the day. So I don't think that we tend to realize, because it's in our subconscious, what our intent is, but our intent is formed by what we're thinking and what we're acting out, because you can't have an intent without a thought coming through there first.
Right. Right.
Your thoughts, if you sit there and you dwell on something long enough, it's going to manifest in your body somehow, whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah. So going even further into the concept of intent, because this is really important for conscious creators of reality who are of high frequency, because they're trying to create higher and higher experiences to experience themselves within the reality. So intent is like an emotion. I mean, yeah, there's the concept of intention, like I'm going to have the intention of finishing my homework. Okay. But you're talking about intention beyond just the concept of finishing an action. You're talking about intention in terms of conveying the emotion. Like my intent on finishing this marathon is to be super happy when I win and just be in like ultimate love and enjoyment of that experience of winning and completing that goal. Um, so it's a little bit different understanding of intent. It's like, what is the emotion? What is the end emotion that you're trying to bask in from doing this or from working on this?
That's
Is
one
that
way
is that kind of like how I'm trying to clarify for people who are going, well, I do intentions all the time. I'm always saying mantras and this intention and that intention. But you're
well,
talking about it in like an emotional scale.
well, because there's several dimensions of that. I mean, okay, if you take the Catholics, for example, they have their little prayer beads and they do, and I don't even remember the rosary. They quote the rosary and they're saying the same thing over and over and over. Yeah, they're saying something, but they're not owning it. I have to say the best quote that I ever had is one of the best things that somebody said to me when I did my master's at Yale. And I don't know if you're familiar with Benny Goodman, but he is a guy from the jazz age, and he would come to school and he would work with us. And I ended up going to his house and playing my master's recital for him there and was playing for him. And he goes, you have to play the music like you own it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take that over to intention, if a person is doing their rosary beads and just doing it as an action, but not really owning what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like an affirmation or your mantras or all these other things. People do that stuff all the time, but does it change them? If it's not meant to change you from the inside out, then I'm not sure that it's really helpful. Because, it's not like, I know lots of people who will do the rosary all of the time, but does it change them from the inside out? If it doesn't, they're missing a dimension of that intent. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The intention has to be felt, everyone. It has to be felt. Like when you say, for example, I just want to kind of bring this home for people to understand this dimension of intent, and understand the living letters and how they're living. So, for example, if somebody says, "Oh, I love you," okay, great, I love you. I love the dog. I love the cat. I love the house. I love whatever. But if they are really in love with somebody, like their spouse or their children, they're like, "I love you." It's felt in the heart, and the other person feels it in the heart as well. It's not a superficial "I love you." It's a real "I love you." It's a genuine "I love you," and there's a difference, and it's felt in the heart. So
Well,
maybe,
see, your thoughts, your intents, and your actions, three things are working in unison.
mm-hmm,
When you've got that heartfelt "I love you," it's not just a thought, it's not just a word, it's all three of them working together in unison, resonating with the frequency of whatever it is. So if I love you, so they are all three resonating with love.
mm-hmm,
But see, if we don't carry love in ourselves, there's no way we can release it to anyone else. And I always say, I'm not going to show you anything or do anything that I'm not doing myself. If I can't love you the way that Creator loves me, then I can't demonstrate that love to you because I'm not holding it myself.
right.
And that is the whole point of the Hebrew culture is to make it many dimensions thick. It's not just, well, here's a mantra, you say the mantra. If it doesn't change you from the inside out, then there's several dimensions that need to be added to it to fulfill that becoming part of you. And
Love
I
it.
think that's how the Hebrew living letters work.
Wonderful. I like that. People really rewind that section. That's really going to help you with working on your manifestations and just really getting a really juicy result out of that. So, in Buddhism, the master teacher Buddha and Bodhisattva Kwan left a famous energy healing chant of Om Mani Padme Hum, which when you sing it, it's Om Mani Padme Hum. It translates to 289.13 hertz, 139.86 hertz, 293.13 hertz, 519.77 hertz, 623.3 hertz, 856.1 hertz, 122.76 hertz, 122.1 hertz, 487.9 hertz, and 487.6 hertz. Overall, it's just a combined frequency that helps you live in harmonics with source and live your best version. So these healing frequencies can also be found in the ancient Hindu Shiva chant, Om Namah Shivaya, which is, when you sing it out, is Om Namah Shivaya. So these are, once you understand this, you can hear these in other cultures as well. So what are the hertz healing frequencies in the Hebrew healing? I know you were talking about it a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, I'm a little confused because you were singing the same note. So, but how did you get those other hertz out of that one note?
So the Om Mani Padme, the Kwan Yin chant is very similar to the Hindu Shiva chant.
Okay,
that's why they have similar stuff.
Say those hertz again. 180 something.
So there's, there's 289, 139, 293, 519, 620. Yeah, 623. I'm not going to go with the points because if you're going to go to point, they go to point something. I'm just going to do the main ones. Okay. 856, 122, 487, and 480. Yeah, 487. Yeah.
Those are all somewhere around different octaves of the B.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that's in the 432 concert pitch.
Okay, yeah, because the Hebrew healing letters, two of the hertz is yeah, the Hebrew healing living letters, two of the hertz is 432 and 444. So the Shiva chant and Kuan Yin's Bodhisattva chant, you're saying all those combined make 432 as well. So everybody's at 432.
Okay,
or
so
some around there.
The best way to describe it, okay, 444 is a specific concert pitch. It's like if I go into a Microsoft Word document and I pick the font Calibri, mm-hmm. that is I would call that my temperament, my musical temperament. Then I change every note on my musical scale to match whatever temperament I chose. Mm-hmm. So we might also have the concert pitch of Calibri versus the concert pitch of, I don't know, Wingdings or something like that, which is another font. They're similar because 432 and 444 are both A's. One of them is just a lower pitch than the other. And so if you take A 444 above middle C, you have to adjust all of the other notes in this scale so that they sound good with that particular A. Now, A432 is quite a bit lower and is closer to all of the frequencies within the earth, sacred numbers and all of those things. You would have to retune all of your notes on your instrument so that they sound good with 432. So the numbers that you were giving me were different, as quickly as I could look them up, are closer to the notes in the 430 concert pitch than they are in the 444 concert pitch, because that's almost a half a step difference between the concert pitches.
So what's the difference what is the outcome that they bring in the Hebrew letters?
Well, the Hebrew letters, amazingly enough, are also centered on the 432 concert pitch.
Okay, so everybody's dancing around 432.
Yeah, generally in that.
Yeah, generally speaking. So why 430? Okay, so my question is, why 430? Why is everybody dancing around 432? What is the magic around 432 hertz?
I think it has to do with what resonates within the earth itself, and because our physical bodies are on the earth, we're living here, so we're trying to entrain our body with the frequencies and things that are within the earth, because you know, if you're sick like I was for that 19 years, it's really hard to focus on your emotional state and your spiritual state because you're so focused on the body. So it seems to me that all of the stuff in the 432 tends to help bring our body and our souls into alignment. Interestingly enough, the 444 concert pitch, all of the numbers that match up with that tend to have things to do with the New Jerusalem, which is talked about in Revelation. So if you go look up the qubits and all of the numbers, the sacred numbers involving the New Jerusalem, those are more closely related to the 444 concert pitch, which is a higher, they're just higher.
Okay.
Let me demonstrate. Let me find my phone again, whatever I did with the silly thing. And the easiest way, I can talk about it till I'm, blue in the face. So if I play, I'm going to turn this to 432. Here's this F in 432. It's kind of, now I'm going to put it in 444. Can you hear the difference?
What's the higher?
F is a lot sharper. So that means all of the other notes within on the scale. So on this keyboard, all of those notes in the 440 have to be tuned high enough that they sound good with that specific pitch. So if I go back down to the 432, I have to retune my instrument so all the notes sound good there. So every other note I play on this keyboard, that is all going to sound good with 432. I go back to 444. Now I'm back at 444. So now listen. I mean, you can tell every one of those notes is higher. So you have to, you're not just adjusting one note, you're adjusting every note in the scale so that they sound harmonious together. And I just thought it was really interesting that everything within the earth and our physical body and our emotions all go with 432, but our spirit stuff tends to go with 444. I'm like,
Okay, so now we're going to open up a whole different can of worms with this because we're getting into we're getting into more about harmonics. Okay, so this is really advanced stuff for people. So I hope everybody's with us so far. We're not losing anybody. So so the Hebrew living letters in the Hebrew energy healing resonates at typically 432 hertz.
Well, in that concert pitch,
in that concert pitch. Okay. The ancient Vedic Hindu Shiva chant, for the most part, is at 432 or around about.
In that concert pitch, yes.
In Buddhism and in Tibetan Buddhism, the common Om Mani Padme Hum chant from the Bodhisattva and Buddha Kwan is also in around about 432. And you're saying that the Earth's harmonic frequency, the planet Earth that we live on and are part of, resonates at 432. So we're just tuning ourselves to Mother Earth.
Basically.
In essence. Okay.
I just have to make people, because everyone thinks the number 432. I'm saying in that concert pitch. That means all of the other notes, it might not be specifically 432. It might be an octave lower. 432 is an A. It might be a G sharp or an F or an F sharp. I mean, at the very beginning of creation, they've actually measured the wavelengths of the sound that came out at the beginning of creation. It was an F sharp. But it was not in the 432 concert pitch. It was actually probably closer to 438. In that concert pitch. But they had to raise it up like 40 or 50 octaves to bring it into a hearable thing. And there was a guy, his name was Mark Whipple, Whipple. They did this whole thing called the Science of Sound, and he got up there and he played all this stuff. Or the World Science Festival or something like that. It was like 2014. And he got up there and he did this whole presentation on that. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because all of this, for example, all of the platonic solids, those, if you take the inside angles of all of the platonic solids and you add everything up, those all spell out an F sharp major triad in the 432 concert pitch.
Here's my next level question for you. I know people are never going to ask you these questions in your lifetime, so you're going to get it from Von Gogh. So the thing is that the New Jerusalem frequency, you're saying is 444. And people love 444 because those are people who are really into angel numbers. They love the repeat numbers. Anyways, 444. And I'm sure in other cultures, there are chants that resonate at around about 444 in that scale. Okay. And the thing is that when you consider the analogy of music notes being, you know, F, A, whatever, B, whatever, within these frequencies, it's almost like every single person, we know in mandalas, they have their own frequency, their own unique frequency. So if we take people as unique frequencies, as unique music notes within the symphony of this frequency, whatever hertz it is at, if we all play our music note or our tune or play the best version of ourselves to the best ability that we can, then the symphony plays perfectly in that new resonance. Okay. So yeah, I'm not losing anybody here. So how are we as a people made of energy and frequency playing at different pitches and notes within our consciousness going to raise ourselves up to a collective 444 hertz? Because we're all seems like tuning into 432. That's the earth. So like, is the earth changing to 444 and then we're slowly upgrading our tuning to that? I mean, I know this is going to be this hasn't been fully investigated, so this is kind of hypothesis, but what are your thoughts on that? Because this is what a lot of people think about, like, we're raising our frequency, we're ascending to these higher frequencies, Earth's moving to these higher frequencies, the Schumann resonance is moving to these higher frequencies. Well, we're having this conversation in music.
Well, you know, that's a question that's yet to be explored. I mean, it was only like 6 months ago that I'm like, when I was doing all this research for this class, which you're going to ask me about later, I was looking at numbers specifically, and I'm like, because I'm making charts of important numbers and then looking up to see where they fit on the frequency charts. And I just noticed if you go into the book of Revelation and you look up all the measurements and all the numbers associated with the New Jerusalem, that happens to fit more closely with 444. Now, it's a cat. He's being a dork.
He wants to come in too.
Oh, I'm surprised you haven't seen one of them on my lap yet.
That's fine.
So when we're talking about raising our frequency, really what I think that involves is raising it so that we are resonating love. We're resonating joy. We're resonating peace. We get rid of judging others. You know, someone says something mean to us, that we don't have a negative trigger where we turn around, we want to bite their head off. So when we're talking about raising our frequency, that is not necessarily raising the pitch. It's raising to a stronger frequency. It's like the difference between a turbo engine and just your standard engine. One has more power behind it. Love has more power behind it than anger. If we're constantly resonating anger, we're going to have sick bodies. So if we've got, I think, a good barometer of checking where we are in the resonance category is to look and see what's wrong with you physically. And I had to get to that point where I started looking at myself and like, what in the heck is going on? And, because I've been perfectly healthy until I got married, but then all of a sudden I started, he was a narcissist, and I came into agreement. I entrained and I entangled with his lies. Out of those lies, I began to resonate the negative things. As I resonated those negative things, I lowered the frequencies within myself so that I became those negative things.
Well, maybe he was trying to marry up in frequency, and then you ended up You ended up marrying down in frequency.
Well, no, what I realized is because of some of my own insecurities. So you have to be willing to look at what the things within you, or in my case, me, that allowed me to do that. Once I did that, this is another one of those when we talk about activations, I'm sitting here, and I have an encounter with the living creator, and I'm seeing myself spinning around this castle, this really dark gray castle. I'm just going, vroom, vroom, vroom. And I'm like, what is going on? And of course, he never tells me the answer. He makes me figure it out. And it's like, bammo, all of a sudden this thought comes to my mind. And I'm like, oh, this is when I'm doing things in my own strength and trying to do these things out of my own power. And then, I'm like, okay, I choose to change that. And, instead of living out of the negativity, then you have to practice living out of the opposite thing. Just like I send my students into a practice room to practice their scales over and over. Every semester, they play their scales faster than they did the semester before. And they have to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. As you probably know this, your cells replicate, they renew every 7 years. So if you think, I had to go back and think about this. It took me about 7 years from the beginning of when I started changing my mindsets before that sickness was completely gone. It was just one day I went, wait a minute, I'm not having to do blah, 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 and I have more energy. So as we begin changing the things within us that are weaker frequencies, that's when we step into the stronger frequencies. So that's what the raising of the frequencies is. It's not going from 432 to 444. It's changing us from the core of our being so that we are not resonating out of anger, frustration, hate, unforgiveness. All of those things keep us resonating at those lower frequencies. When we allow ourselves to forgive and then truly stand in a place of forgiveness, then we are resonating at a higher frequency or stronger. Because it's, when I say higher, people think it's a pitch, but it's a strength. It's like the difference between a tsunami wave and just a regular ocean wave. One is way stronger than another. It carries more of a power punch to it. Does that help explain that?
Yeah. When you're explaining that, I'm just thinking of like the map of consciousness from Dr. David R. Hawkins, because he had scales of frequencies and numbers for consciousness, and the lower, the hatred, the envy, the greed, all that, those are lower ones, and then the higher ones were like love and acceptance and forgiveness, and all those are the higher ones. And so resonating in those frequencies in whatever turn of life hands to you will typically always give you better options to choose from, and also will be typically a more pleasant experience as you navigate through life. So so it's there's not like an end, there's no end, it's just a continuation and just different experiences. So let me ask you this. Are there popular songs that have these frequencies in them that you know of that maybe we can listen to at night?
Are you talking about songs that are out on the market right now?
Or just any kind of pop culture songs? Does Elvis resonate at 444?
No, because our modern instruments have been tuned to 440 since since 1939 when they set the standard. Actually, the United States started using 440 in the early 1900s. Because I have a clarinet that was built in very, very early, and I have a saxophone that was, from the 1920s that I have here, and they're all tuned to 440. So unless you would tune your instrument down to that, but for everyone, there's this misnomer that 440 is harmful. I'm like, excuse me, I've been playing as a classical musician in 440 forever, and I am perfectly fine. But see, again, that's where your intent goes.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. Has anybody ever tried to create instruments in the 444 range and then try to make music in that range? I mean, what does that sound like? Is there anything like that already out there? Is it not pleasant to our ears? Is it more pleasant to our ears? I mean,
It's honestly personal preference.
Is it?
My album that I have is called 528 Creative DNA is in the 444 concert pitch. Now, I said I'm a clarinet player, and the second song on that album, I played on that. But in order for me to play in 444 is not any different. You can hardly tell the difference between 444 and 440 there. Literally, most people can't tell the difference. So all I did was I put on a shorter barrel, which is that piece that fits between the mouthpiece and the instrument. And I made sure my instrument was really warm so that I was playing sharp. But if you think about it, wind instruments play sharp all the time anyway, because you're putting warm air into the instrument. And if you got nice humidity and it's hot outside, you're going to be hovering around 444, 445 anyway. I mean, if I put a tuner up to my students after they've been playing for half an hour, they're like sharper than sharp. But then we learn to shade our fingerings or use a different fingering or change our embouchure or do something to adjust the pitch. So if you're listening to most bands, they're not going to be, I'm talking about a concert band or an orchestra. They're going to be shifting in and out of A440 all the time, because the longer you're playing and the warmer your instrument gets, the sharper you're going to play. Now, they call period instruments, which is around the time of Mozart and Haydn, and even some of the earlier composers, Brahms and all those dudes. The three Bs, Brahms, Bach, Beethoven, those guys. Depending on what country you lived in and what city you lived in, they made their instruments in a variety of concert pitches, anywhere from 417 all the way up to 460 something.
Well, what did Beethoven? What frequency does it typically play in?
I don't know Beethoven specifically.
What about Mozart?
He was probably closer to 430. But again, a lot of it would depend, because remember, all those musicians traveled from city to city to city.
Right.
And you had to bring your own instruments, because it's no two cities use the same tuning. It would be like, I could go to, there's two building places that are just down, Albany Falls and the Ace. I could go to Albany Falls and get a bolt. Then I could go to Ace and look for the same bolt, but their measurements are different. So it would, if you go back then, they didn't have any measurements that were the same. So depending on where you lived, you could only buy your things that you needed in that city, because the next city might have different measurements. That's why we have the International Standards of Organization, which is the ISO. So they are the ones who actually set the concert pitch to 439. So 440. So the whole world, we could travel the world and all use the same instruments and not have to carry 5 different instruments with us.
Well, it just sounds like, okay, well, let me ask you this. Is the audience affected differently when they listen to music at a, let's say 432 hertz versus a 444 hertz? Is there a difference in terms of how they receive the music? Are they much happier at one versus another?
I think it depends on their intent. And, and I say that because if you go look at all the placebo studies, the people who go into these studies and they give half of them the sugar water and the other half the drug, and the people that have the sugar water, some of them have just the same amount of healing, because their intent is, I'm going to be healed when I take this. If someone is listening to 432 music and saying, I'm going to feel more peace when I listen to this, they're going to. If they listen to 444 and say, I'm going to feel more peace when I listen to this, that's where the intent comes in. I mean, but, I think if you just put music on to play it with no, just to have it as the background, which, they do, like I said, for years I played in 440 and it's never bothered me. I still play in 440 all the time and it doesn't bother me. My grand piano is tuned to 440. And I get just as much joy out of that as I do tuning my keyboard to 432. But my intent when I'm playing this piano is I'm going to find joy out of it. My intent in playing the keyboard, whether I'm at 432, 444, my intent is to release the frequency of love, joy, peace, or whatever it is into the music as I am creating it. Now, I do believe that someone who listens to my music will notice that, because they are responding to the intent that I put into the music, because matter carries memory.
It's true.
So the music is going to carry the memory of the intent of the artist.
It's true. Well, that it's like what they're saying in art. You can go and buy a print, a digital art, or an AI created art, and it doesn't seem to have a lot of resonance or soul energy. But if you buy it from the actual artist who put their heart and soul in creating it, like brushstroke per brushstroke or music note per music note, you can feel the love in it. It's the same thing when they say that you can taste the soul food from the cook. It's the same exact thing. You get a little essence of the energy of the creator that is creating that piece of food or that art or that music. But if it is just an artificial thing, it's a pretty picture, but you may not get the full benefit. So let me ask you this. You offer personalized songs called frequency immersions. What do you do different from your albums versus personalized songs?
Well, there's two versions of personalized song. You can order a personal song, which I create on a keyboard. And there's a form that you fill out, and then you tell me a little bit about you or whatever. I can't remember what's on the form. And then I go sit at my keyboard, and then I play something, just play from what's coming from within me. Generally, when I play a song that way, I'll get a picture or I'll get a vision, or a sense of something. And then like I hear a waterfall, so I might play waterfall sounds, or I see a field of flowers and I might play something that sounds like I'm in a field of flowers. And it's like, sometimes I'll get a movie playing through my brain. Then what I'll do is I'll send that song to the person. I'll say, well, I sensed this, or I felt this, or I heard this, and do with that whatever you want. And it's really interesting that people will respond back to me like, wow, that's interesting, because they say it really fits. But a lot of times they will give me a little bit of direction. And so what I encourage people to do is to listen frequently to the song and release into themselves. It's like changing the memory. You're practicing getting rid of the negative thing and overriding it with the positive thing. It's not like you're going to say something once and it's going to happen. You have to practice it, bring it into your system, so your memory of all your internal parts begins to resonate with the new thing you're placing over it. Then the frequency immersion is where you choose the crystal bowls that resonate with you at that moment. Now, 2 weeks from now, it might not work. So let me ask you a question. When you go to the doctor and he gives you an antibiotic, what do you do with it?
Oh, okay. I had to think about this. I don't go to the doctor. Okay. I followed the prescription.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So when people come to me for a frequency immersion or a personal song, they choose the bowls that resonate with them that day. And then I create a song. And then out of that, then I send them based on the musical notes that they chose, based on the musical intervals that I played. I might feel like I have to play a chime, keep playing it 5 times, 2, 3, 4, 5, or, some rhythm. Then I'll look up what that number means. I'll look up what the interval means. I'll look up the properties of the musical note. And then I create affirmations, which I send back to them. And it's like, you have a prescription. This is what you can do. So while you're listening to the music, pick the affirmations off the list that feel good to you today. So for example, if I just flip to one of the first ones, because I have my book of that here, one of them would be, I let go of weariness and step into rest, where I'm in that place of perfect peace. So let's say that's an affirmation. You envision yourself. I'm letting go. What is it? I'm letting go of weariness. I just breathe out weariness. And I breathe in rest. And I allow myself to be in that place of perfect peace. So you basically just engage with that affirmation that day. Well, the next day, because I always usually send 10 to 11, then the next day you might pick another one, and you do the list until you realize, okay, I think I'm done with this, just like you would with an antibiotic because they say take it twice a day, 10, I think it's usually 10 days. I don't know. I haven't been to the doctor in 20 years, so I don't know. But,
we're not being very good patients right now.
no, but I understand, because my neighbor, unfortunately she passed away in November, but I practiced on her. She would come over for sound baths, and you can do them in person or you can order them online. And the first time she had a sound bath, she had this tumor, 20-pound tumor, and she looked like she was pregnant of cancer. And she would feel the cancer moving around. And when I hit a certain bowl, and she knew that was the bowl that she needed because it was doing something to the cancer. Because crystal bowls, they're made of quartz crystal, and we have quartz crystalline structures in our bodies. And so my frequency, my intent is to put whatever her body needs and whatever her entire system, spirit, soul, and body needs to go into her. And I don't necessarily know what that is. It has to be through intuition. So she actually got a vision of our creator's DNA just boom, 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 blasting the cancer away. Boom, 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 boom. And eventually she was healed of it. They took the tumor out and she was fine, but they missed something. And then she ended up developing lung cancer a year later and said, I'm done. I'm not going to do this. And she was dead in a month and a half. But as long as she was willing to fight and to stand in that position of seeing that DNA be blasted, then she was doing well. So that's the purpose of the affirmations that I send with the frequency immersion is to help you or the recipient entrain and entangle with the words that are in the affirmations, to pair that with the music. Here's, you got your spooky accent at a distance, that quantum entanglement. Bring the energy that's needed to create the healing that you need in your entire system.
Right. And do you create different sound baths for different things, or are they all the same?
Oh, no, they're not. I mean, I will do them for people individually, but for example, we did one where I had a whole group of people here and they all came in the room and I'm like, okay, what theme would you like? So we picked, everybody was really feeling stressed out. So we did a peace sound bath. And I believe that one's on my YouTube channel. It's called Peace in the Storm. And we did that as a group because everyone was feeling, because there was a lot of stuff going on in the world that was in the middle of all this the last 2 years. I didn't say the word. I just gave it a disgusting sound. It's really what it is. And so they all sat down.
I call it the purge. The purge. The purge.
No, I know. Okay, fine. We'll leave it that there. So anyway, I played this. We created this sound bath, which we considered that, what you're saying, the purge, our storm. And then we stepped into peace and resonated with peace. So even though the storm might be staring us in the face, we're going, I'm sorry, I'm not going to participate with you today. You have to leave. Gone. And so you stay in that place of peace.
I like it. Now, can you tell us about your frequency immersion practitioner course that you teach as well? So if somebody wanted to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of students that watch these Merkaba Chakras podcasts for different courses to take. So where can they go and what can they expect to learn from your course?
Okay. Well, first of all, you go to my website, healingfrequenciesmusic.com, and there's the thing up there that in the tab that says training, and that actually takes you to a separate website. It's frequencyimmersion.com, but it's just, you can get to everything from healingfrequenciesmusic.com. It's a 3-module course. And one of the things that I guess you would say, I teach it or look at it from a worldview that for lack of a better word, Christian mysticism, which lines up with many of the Buddhist thoughts that you've talked about and the other things, but we use, biblical principles, which still line up with all the, I'm just looking at it from that perspective, because that's what, I am most familiar with, and I could see that. So the module 1 is where you have to understand that you are a creative person, and then we start working on the things within ourselves, because like I said, if you don't have it within you to give, then you have no business giving it to anyone else. And I'm going to use a perfect example. How many psychologists have you gone to that are so messed up themselves that they can help you? Exactly.
Well, I've
A
never
lot
gone to
of
a psychologist, but I've heard many of my clients have gone to many, and the
Right.
number is 0.
A lot of people go into psychology because they want to figure out what's wrong with them. If you can't fix yourself, you can't fix anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at the whole first module as, okay, start dealing with the things in yourself, because if you are in a position where someone's energy can affect you, then you're not in a good spot.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to stand in a place where someone who is 10 times negative Nancy standing right there, that is not going to affect you, because you are resonating so much love, so much peace, so much joy, that what's within you is stronger than that's within them.
Right.
And so that's why the whole thing is working on yourself, understanding that you are valued. You have to have some self-worth. You are a creative. You can step into this place of creativity. So the whole first module is about learning that part. Then the second module is about looking at the technical details of, this is how frequency works. We look at, I don't even remember all the things, but it's the information that you need to understand about frequency and how it all works. Module 3 is where you actually come here for live training, but you have to pass a application process to get into it, because I don't want you in my house if you still got so many personal issues that you're going to melt into a puddle when you come here.
So it's mostly so the first 2 modules are online, remote,
Yes.
and they do it at your own pace.
Right.
And you're still going to learn a lot and be able to apply a lot of these techniques on yourself, onto other people, et cetera, et cetera. But then if you want to do the in-person training, that's the 3rd module.
Right. And so
Okay.
you apply to get into the 3rd module, and there's 10. So you get all the information for the aspects of the musical notes. You get all the information for the aspects of the musical intervals, and you have to understand basic music theory, which you get in module 2. This is a scale. This is a major third. This is a perfect fourth. This is a perfect fifth. This is how you tell what your intervals are. This is how you create those intervals on a crystal bowl. This is the fundamental frequency, understanding some basic music terminology. We go over, how do you record a sound bath? How do you turn it? I put mine into Audacity. What equipment should you use to record with? Just the simple stuff. All of that is done in module 3 just to learn. But module 2, you understand the concepts, but you don't get all of the details of those concepts until you get into module 3. After you've been accepted into the program, you have passed and you've completed all of your homework, and you have your book together. I'll just show you the book. This is the book. Frequency, immersion. Oh, it's my background. Frequency.
I see it. Yeah, right there.
Your handbook. Once you have this all together and you have printed everything out and you've done all the homework, then you schedule a week-long session here at my house. You have to come to Idaho. It's beautiful. And
I almost moved to Idaho, Dell. I could have been your neighbor.
You could have been. Where in Idaho were you going to move to?
Over by Coeur d'Alene.
Oh, I'm an hour north of Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah, but we decided to stay and fight for Washington, so we're in Washington.
Washington D.C. or Washington State?
Washington State.
Where in Washington State?
I'm over by the islands. San Juan Islands, Whidbey Island, Camino Island, the islands.
Okay. All right. So all right. I'm clueful. Anyway, so I'm in the process of building a retreat center. And so when people come to train, they stay in the retreat center, and I feed them and house them, and we do frequency.
What do you feed them? Do you feed them a seven course meal, or do they make their own food? Is it farm table? I'm a foodie. So
no,
you'll sell me on just the food aspect alone.
A lot of it just depends on what people want to eat and what, because I used to cook for a fraternity and a sorority. So I have cooked for lots of people. And so
you're not making tuna boats, are you? Tuna boats or some kind of
no,
it's good food.
Yeah, people love my scones. I make the bomb.com scones. Um,
Mm.
and I have somebody who's coming tomorrow to help me finish putting up finishing the last bits and pieces, molding and putting the ceiling on and things in the retreat center. And I've already bought all the food. I bought him steaks and all, and of course I'm going to make him a roast and use my grandmother's gravy, which, tasty, wasty, smashy.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so you're selling me on just like the dining and the in experience, not the course. The course is going to be wonderful and stuff, but I'm already like brought into that one. So, okay, so you're going to be fed well when you go to level 3 or when you start taking some of the workshops at the retreat. And then now, when do you think you're going to show pictures of the retreat option with the workshops that are offered at the retreat?
Oh, as soon as I get it done. It was, I was supposed to have it done last August because we were going to do we did retreats here anyway. We just used the main house.
Mhm.
And then I have a camper that people stayed in, and I just couldn't have as many people here. But I have a shed that I built out of doors and painted all these jewel tone colors. That's going to be the men's bunkhouse. But right now it's stuffed with all the things that go into the retreat center and the retreats. So there's several places on the property people can stay, just depending on where they are. But I am hoping that by June I will have the whole thing completed and I'll have pictures up. And I also know that people will come here because they want a personal sound bath.
Right.
I can do them either in person or I can do them online. So when people come to stay for a sound bath, rather than sending them to Priest River, which is 10 minutes away, they can rent the retreat center and stay there. And all they do is walk into the main house for their sound bath. Then they can leave the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a way that you can stay on site, but still have your own space where you can stay. So
Right.
it's not just for the frequency immersion training. It's for people who have come from out of town, who want to spend a couple days up here, need a place to stay for a sound bath. So fine, they can rent that and stay there.
Wow, it sounds fantastic. There's a lot of different options to choose from. With you can come for the retreat just to have the experience of the sound bath and the healing and the meditation. Maybe pick up a couple different tools for frequency entrainment, and of course, be fed very well and housed very comfortably. So that alone is fun. But then of course, if you're coming as a student wanting to learn the full course, you can get the full course training as well. So I think there is a booming interest in those types of offerings as well. So
Right.
I love to hear that. Can't wait. When you get that up, send me an email and then I'll put it up onto your show episodes so that people can go there and they can get all the information about that. So let's talk about your book, Kingdom Shift. Okay.
Oh, yeah, Kingdom Shift.
Kingdom Shift. Yeah, show them your book. Show me your book, Kingdom Shift. And then the subtitle is
How to prepare for God's global reset.
Thank you. So what is the clarion call in God's global reset?
Well, I think we've kind of hit on some of that, is getting ourselves to a place where we are walking in our identity. We're not resonating fear. We're not, what's going on in the world right now is rather fascinating. And you're watching people just every time they turn around, they're fearful of something. They don't understand their personal identity. I mean, if someone says something negative to them, they just melt.
They get triggered. They get triggered easily. Now, Del, let me ask you this about that, since you're bringing up this topic of people being triggered easily by different aspects of the pandemic and in the current events, whatever it is that's being played out, whatever new script that's rolling out.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good way of saying it.
Right. So people are being triggered really easily, and they're also being I'm not sure if the appropriate word is played, but anyways, they're being triggered and they're getting really emotional and they're playing into whatever emotion is trying to be conveyed. So you're speaking from a perspective of an observer, observing and going, okay, well, this is interesting, this is fascinating. But as somebody who's being triggered and like getting really into whatever it is that they're being triggered by, they're having that experience of being fearful and being subservient and being, all of what comes in with playing that role within the script. So how does one move from that to being an observer and not being so easily triggered so they can see a bigger picture and maybe navigate through these nuances a little bit more peacefully without losing it?
Learn not to be offended by every little thing that comes your way is the first
Okay.
thing. I mean, when you take offense, you become a fence. And, for example, last summer on the family camping trip, I had someone come to me and they got upset at something I said to them. And I said, and there was no harm meant at all. But this particular person just, gets easily triggered by anything that could possibly be perceived as negative.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell wanted to pick a fight with me. And so started spewing a bunch of nastiness at me. And I looked at him and I said, will you forgive me? And he just kind of went like this. And he goes, yes. And then he goes, well, why would you say that? And I said, did I just ask if you would forgive me? And you said, yes. He goes, I did. I said, then why do we need to discuss it any further?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't engage because I knew, because I could feel the energy coming off, that the whole point was just to argue with me and to present a particular point of view. And one of the things that I am learning in this process is I don't always have to stick out my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And if something so easily negatively triggers me, then that means the problem is probably more with me and not the other person. So anytime something comes at me and I have a trigger, the first thing I do is look at myself and say, what within me responded negatively to that? Do I need to look at something within myself so that I'm no longer negatively triggered? See, because situations around us are not necessarily going to change. It's how we respond to those negative things. And as you remember, we were talking earlier about a certain convoy of vehicles traveling around the country. And when I get on, I will follow some of the stuff that's going in these chats. And some of the nastiness coming out of there, I just think, do you realize when you are spewing all this nastiness in the chat, I can physically feel that energy in the chat. And I know that it affects the whoever the live streamer is at the time. And then I will literally grab my drum. And with the opposite, I say, I just release peace into every member of this chat. I release more love. I drop a love bomb. I drop a truth bomb. And every time one of those truckers honks, I draw, my whole thing is let's spread some unity throughout the country. Let's spread some of this. And I just start release. I'm not affected by the negativity that's coming from the people that are saying weird stuff, whether it's coming from these live streamers or whether it's coming from any of the media outlets. Because if you listen to what they say in the media, 99.99% of it tends to have a negative bent. It always feels like there's something that's being complained about.
Right.
And then if you go and you watch some of these things where it does the exact opposite, it's like these feel-good stories. The difference between a feel-good story and a story that doesn't, everybody knows the difference between the two. But when you've got so much more of this negativity just going blah at you, then you learn to override that by bringing in the other thing and covering it with something that's a stronger frequency. And so I just see myself as one of those people who's bringing the stronger frequency and releasing it. And we can literally change atmospheres by doing that. But we can't do it if we're not doing it within ourselves.
Right. Well, I can relate to that in that so half of my family got this and the other half didn't. And some of the people that I know really believed that being around myself and my half of family that decide not to partake in that in any way, shape, or form, that something was going to happen to them, something was going to happen to us. They just thought the worst was going to happen. And 2 years later, we're still around. We all got it. we all recovered. We're still around. We're still hugging each other. We're still visiting everybody who wants to visit with us. We're still visiting people who accepted us to visit them. I still saw half my family and saw my mom, all that kind of stuff. So it didn't make any difference for us. But the only difference is for those parts of the family who were really, really into that narrative of, if you don't follow this this campaign, that you're going to and you're you're going to be sick, and you're going to spread sickness to everybody, and it's just going to be your walking, you know, vial or whatever the thing was, and that wasn't the case. And so I always held the perspective of, I'm always going to be here for you with love in whatever you're going through.
And,
Okay. And whatever you're going through, I will be there for you, whatever it is you're going through. If you want me there, if you don't want me there, I will respect that as well. But I will still be here for you.
Right.
So, and that's the energy. Done.
Well, and I joked with my students. I said, well, I gave up being sick for Lent like 6 years ago. Everyone jokes, well, how's that working for you? I said, quite well, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's an experience. It's an experience. And so let's break this really quick for everybody, because I want people to read your books, because there's a lot of wisdom in your books. Without giving it too far away, what is the global reset according to God in your book?
Well, okay, this is the whole point of going from Pisces to air which one are we entering?
Aquarius.
Aquarius. Thank you. I had a brain fart. Sorry.
It's okay.
So it's, if you, in the book, I show history of how it happened at the time of Christ. You know, everything that went on during that time, massive civil unrest, all these other things. You know, you see things within the earth, things within the people, things within the governments. All of this stuff that happened then is happening again. So we know that there's some form of a reset going on. Now there's a negative version of it, but there's also a positive version of it. So rather than focusing on the negative aspect of what some people say that this reset is going to do, I'm like, okay, how can we look at this from this angle? You know, because if we get outside of our boxes that say, okay, if the entire financial system collapses, oh, horrors, it's going to blah, 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 blah. But okay, let's say something does happen financially and things go kaboom. What are the positives of that? You see, we tend to look at all of this stuff over here, but there's some times where you might literally need to just kick something in the shorts and send it flying out the door, even though we're so used to that. It's learning to see it from a different perspective. Because, you know, I grew up in understanding that every negative thing that happens to you in life, if you look at it from a, what can I learn from this perspective, you're going to come out on the other end. Now, trust me, most people who, you know, were almost, you know, killed by their husband, that takes them a long time to get over the trauma from something like that. There are people who've been in abusive situations who never get over the trauma. But, I look, so it's very similar. You learn to say, okay, what can I learn from this? What was my piece in the midst of it? Now, at first I wouldn't look at it, but I had to realize I came into agreement with the lies. So in the reset, what have we come into agreement with that's a lie? What can we look at that has hope in it? What is the hope for the age of Aquarius, rather than what is the negativity of moving into the age of Aquarius? That really is the main focus. You know, of course, being an educator, let's take a walk down history lane. Let's look and see what it is. Then we have to change our paradigm, shift within us the things that keep us in fear, so that we're not seeing things as a negative Nancy, but we're seeing things as a positive Polly, for lack of a better word to say.
Yeah. Well, do you have a last message you want to, leave everybody with? Like a last one?
Last message would be probably just learn to function and resonate love. Because once we learn to resonate with that, perfect love truly does cast out all fear.
Yes, I love that. And it also heals your body of any impurities.
See, there you go. And I'm saying I am not completely pure, but this is the healthiest I've been in 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to, I'm actually retiring at the end of this year, and I'm healthier now than I have been in a very long time.
That's good to know. Well, Del, thank you for offering your services and unique research approach to help like-minded people reach the highest energy healing frequency here on Spaceship Earth. So for more information about Del Hungerford's music energy healing courses and books, please visit her website, which is healingfrequenciesmusic.com. And thank you kindly to our listeners for listening to another enlightening conversation. Until next time, blessings.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It was fun.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Merkaba Chakras, where we talk Buddhism in the 5th dimension. For more information about today's guest, please go to the show description. For more information about Vaughn's metaphysical work, please go to merkabachakras.com. The views expressed today are for entertainment purposes and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or replace any medical or legal advice. Don't forget to subscribe for more interviews about the 5th dimension. Until we meet again, blessings.